What's good, everybody? I'm Jędrek, he's Sodek, and today we are gonna talk about our top 10, or I guess little bit more than 10 cards from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty for Modern. Let's go. Alrighty, Kamigawa is I think the strongest set that we've had, like the standard legal set that we've had in quite some time. So I'm actually way more excited about it than I was about either Innistrad or Forgotten Realms. I think the last really important addition to Modern out of those sets was Expressive Iteration, I think.
It was a really important one, but it was quite some time ago.
Yeah, it was almost a year ago in Strixhaven. And ever since then, those standard legal sets were kind of disappointing. Maybe not disappointing. I guess they were exactly what we hope they would be for Modern, which is like some role player cards, but nothing super strong. People were kind of hyped about some of those cards, like for example, about Cultivator Colossus for like 2 days or something. And there is obviously cards like Consider, there is Faithful Mending. So some of those cards are strong. But I think that Kamigawa has significantly more cards that will be good, or at least playable in the format.
I will feel that saying we'll see play will be better than saying that's something extremely powerful. Like, I think that cards from Kamigawa will be like 100% seen, like in a year from now, in 2 years from now, etc., etc. So that's probably a good sign for this set.
I think that's more or less where we want to be with those cards. So let's start with our honorable mentions. Then we have a top 10 list. So our first honorable mention is Careful Cultivation, which is a card. I guess all of those are cards. It is a 2-mana enchantment, aura. It costs 1 and a green, and it has some text that's not really important. I don't even know what it is, like what it actually grants as an aura. But the important part of it is it has channel for 1 and a green. You can make an effective land war elf. It's human monk, I think, but it's a 1/1 that can tap for green. And yes, Sodek?
This enchantment originally is for 3 mana. It's an enchantment artifact or creature, and it gives you +1/+3 and reach, and you can tap it to gain double green.
Okay.
But this is kind of irrelevant. And will be rarely seen.
Yeah, the important part of this in Modern is that you can channel it for 1 and a green to create a 1/1 human monk that can tap for green, which means that you can channel it on turn 2 and on turn 3 cast Indomitable Creativity and do your creativity stuff a turn earlier. I guess technically the actual part of aura of this card can be somewhat playable, like in the red-green creativity deck that wants to creativity into Titan. You will mostly use it to channel, but you can also put it on a creature on turn 3 and on turn 4 add 2 mana and play Titan for 6 mana. So in those decks, sometimes I think you will use the actual mode of this card, but most of the time it will be just for channel purposes.
Yeah, I feel like this card combos with creativity really well, and like once you said it, like I'm instantly hooked. Maybe that's the card the deck was missing, because earlier like the mana waste was extremely clunky because you needed to enable Dwarven Mire. You played Strike It Reach, which is kind of shitty, and Careful Cultivation like gives you a mana guy, like not only a treasure, so you can tap it to get mana and target it, which wasn't the case with Strike It Reach. So it was quite hard to speed up the creativity aspect of the deck. So maybe this will be
to be honest, cool. A 1/1 is much more vulnerable than a treasure token because of stuff like Unholy Hit.
One mana Lanover Elf, like 1/1 alone would be probably better than a treasure token, but 1/1 that gives you mana.
Yeah, like, and also the fact that you can channel it EOT so they can't ping it with Rensky or something like that. I think that's also important.
That's extremely important.
Yeah, as far as creativity decks go, I think that people have been finally understanding that you'd rather play less colors in those decks, and I've seen some deck lists that were moving away from like Rensky, Teferi aspect of the deck. Like there are multiple people who've been playing the blue-red version recently. Like you are just blue-red with a creativity for Archon, and you have like 2 Blood Crypts to cast Archon. And you are playing like Remand, Mana Leak, Lightning Bolt, just blue-red cards, similarly to like blue-red Through the Breach that you played a while back. And I think this aspect is pretty cool of the deck. I do think that red-green is also pretty strong. Like you're just playing a Valakut deck.
Yeah, like
basically
fast Titan.
Yeah, basically any version of this deck that can mitigate the shittiness of Dwarven Mine, I think is a good like move towards something good. And playing 2 colors is the best way to do it, because you can definitely play 4 Dwarven Mines in 2-color deck, and you can be actually quite okay with that, just like you were with Sanctuary. Obviously, Sanctuary was a much stronger effect, but still, like you can just play 4 of those. And
yeah, I'm also thinking about how Careful Cultivation will be good to dodge Blood Moon effects. Although I generally speaking, I think that the Blood Moon effects will be much worse after Kamigawa. Like this is a discussion for the future, but this will also be give you a nice way to get the guy and not be vulnerable to Blood Moon. So that's something I would love to.
Yeah, I guess you still need green to make a guy. So
yeah, but I assume you will be fast enough to create a guy with the channel ability before Blood Moon comes down.
Okay.
It's a 2 mana effect.
Okay, yeah, that seems fair. Yeah, it especially seems like a good matchup. Like your opponent taps 3 mana for Blood Moon, their turn 3, and in response you make a guy and you cast like a Farseek or Sakura Tribe Elder off of it on your turn, and you get forest, and then you have 1 forest, and you can find another forest. So yeah, that seems good. So next card is Mirror Shell Crab. Once again, I don't really remember stats on that one.
Okay, I can help you.
And also, Sodek is the living end expert here. And if this card sees play in Modern, it's almost 100% in living end. So we'll just let Sodek talk about this one.
Okay, thank you. It's a 7 mana card, including double blue. It's a 5/7 creature with ward 3, artifact creature crab, if you are interested in that. The important part of the card is channel for 3 mana, including 1 blue. You can discard the card and counter target spell or ability, which is kind of cool, unless its controller pays 3. So it's a mana leak that can counter ability for 3 mana. And in my opinion, it will be the effect is very cool. It's something very powerful I would love to see, but the problem is that it costs 3 mana. And from my perspective, sometimes playing Quaker of Waves was already a bit too problematic, and 3 mana is something that probably kills the card, the card's potential in the living end. Although I was watching Canister's set review, and he said that maybe for 2 mana pay 1 more would be better, but it is what it is and we can't change it right now. So the concept is cool, but I feel the card is a bit too overcosted to make the change.
Okay, and what about the blue-green turtle? The one that has 2
blue-green
channel
turtle
abilities?
Blue-green turtle is a bit better. Like I can read about it.
Yeah, because it costs 2 mana to
Yeah,
do
because
stuff with it, right?
exactly, because it has the channel ability for 2 mana. Okay, the Colossal Sky Turtle for 7 mana, 6/5 flying ward 2, and you can channel it for 3 mana, including green. You can return target card from your graveyard to your hand, which is somewhat interesting. Like something I would like to see, because you can return, for example, a discarded Cascade effect, or
Grief.
Force Obligation, or Grief,
Yeah.
or whatever you want to. Plus, there's a second ability channel for 2 mana, including 1 blue. You can bounce a creature to its owner's hand, which is kind of poor, because usually you want the opponent to have creatures on board, so your living hand is more powerful. But there are some hide bears. Doughty Void Walker is like probably the most problematic one. But there are like
there are stuff like Dranif Magistrate.
Yeah, like Meddling Mage, Thalia.
Meddling Mage, yeah, Thalia, exactly.
Whatever. Still, yeah. I feel like it's cool to remember that the card exists, but in the current metagame, I don't see the turtle having a slot.
I like that bounce Merktide as well. And it's uncounterable bounce for Merktide.
Yeah, cool. Like generally speaking, the channel effect is like the very the big part of why they are powerful is that they can't be countered by like regular counter magic, and
but you can counter it with the crap.
What? That's actually cool. But overall, I feel that that like these effects are nicely balanced, and there isn't like any card that randomly will break older formats, because Wizards wanted to get a like cheap channel effect, which would be too powerful. So yes. That's a cool part of this set.
Okay. So then next up we have the last honorable mention. It's Hidetsugu Consumes All. It's a saga for 3 mana, 1 red and a black. On first chapter, it destroys each non-land permanent that costs 1 or less. On 2, it exiles each opponent's graveyard, I believe.
All graveyards.
All graveyards, yours as well, okay. And on 3, it exiles and flips into a 3/3 with trample and flying or haste?
No, just trample.
Just trample,
and
okay.
When it deals damage, not combat damage, just damage, put a 1/1 counter on it, and there's a super secret ability. Whenever Vessel of the All-Consuming, the flipped card, deals damage to a player, it has dealt 10 or more damage to the player this turn, they lose the game. So this is some way to win versus Infinite Life, for example. Like this, like in competitive Magic, this like second ability won't matter that often. What matters for the card is the first chapter of the saga.
First and second, I would say.
Second is like more
like in combination with first, basically.
Yeah, we can say that. Generally speaking, exiling everything that costs 1 or less can be very devastating, and we are not even talking about, at this time, not even talking about just cards that are cards that are regularly played. But you can also exile tokens, for example, which is, in my opinion, something that can keep in check many different things. For example, if Asmo would ever be, playable and like powerful, like if they print this one piece the Asmo decks need, this would be a really cool counter, because it would exile both Asmo, Cookbook, and all food tokens. So
that's true. Like, obviously, the biggest issue of the card that it's not compatible with Lurus. And if you are playing a red-black like mid-range deck, you are playing Lurus. And basically, until for as long as we have Ludus in Modern, this can see play in like Boomer Giant lists because people are too stubborn to ditch their Lilianas and Bloodbraids, or in those like red black Fury Grief piles with a lot of undying effects. And also maybe there's a bigger red black deck that just doesn't play Ludus. You play Pyromancer and Blood Moon. I do think that to me the draw to play red black was always Blood Moon and like Pyromancer and stuff like this. So maybe you just want to ditch Ludus in those decks and you are just playing like bigger red black deck with those cards with Fury. You can play a bunch of those legendary lands that we will be surely talking about in this episode. So maybe that's an idea. Okay, so I don't think we have anything else to say about honorable mentions, and we can move to the top 10.
Let's go.
So 10th place on our list is March of the Otherworldly Light. It's a white version of the March cycle. All of those are instants. They all cost X and 1 mana of any given color. And they all have a cost reduction clause. As an additional cost to play this card, you can exile any number of cards of the color that the card is. So in this case, white cards from your hand, and it costs 2 generic mana less for each card exiled this way. And the effect of this card is exile target creature, artifact, or enchantment with converted mana cost X or less. So this card obviously will be instantly compared to Prismatic Ending because it's a fairly similar card. And overall, like in general, it's worse than Prismatic Ending. It's significantly worse than Prismatic Ending because paying 2 mana to exile a 1-drop is not a very good deal. But there are 2 things that can save this card. First, the most important is that it can exile Urza's Saga for 1 white mana because it can exile an enchantment, not just like non-land permanent or something like Prismatic Ending does. So you can pay white to exile Urza's Saga, and that's really strong. Also, it doesn't really care how many colors you have in your deck. And you can play it in like mono white or 2-color decks that couldn't really utilize Prismatic Ending that well. Mostly, I think mono white. Like if you can Prismatic Ending for 2, you are getting most stuff already. Also, if you are playing other color than white, then you probably have removal spells anyways, unless you are playing precisely like blue-white or green-white, I guess, because both like red-white and black-white can play different removal spells. And I do think that this card will be playable in blue-white. I do think this... Yeah, go ahead.
I think that also the instant aspect is very important because all other really good removal spells, namely Prismatic Ending, is sorcery. And if your deck has 4 counter spells for Archmage's Charms and like a few other ways to interact at instant speed, having a removal at instant is also like something you want to do. The problem is that it's always overcosted, and you can be down on tempo if you rely too much on it. Overall, I think that for instance in blue-white, I can see playing like 1 or 2 copies, and it wouldn't be
to complement your endings basically.
Yeah,
because you can only play 4 endings. I think it opens like an interesting possibility maybe of playing like blue-white control with Ludus, because you don't have to play Solitude. Like Solitude is good, or maybe like Jeskai control. You can play like you can play this. You can play like Ending, Iteration. You can play like Fire Eyes, play Ragavan. I guess if you are playing red already, you can just play Unholy Heat instead. So kind of whatever. But it's interesting. Like it's definitely an interesting option.
I feel that the biggest problem for the the Jeskai deck you mentioned would be Urza's Saga, and March is the really good answer to
That's true.
Urza's Saga.
That's true.
Because like Spreading Seas is a really good way to stop Urza's Saga, but it only does that. Like sometimes you can mess up with opponent's mana, etc. But generally speaking, it's just a very narrow card to answer narrow problems. At least it's much more narrow compared to March of Otherworldly Light, because March of Otherworldly Light can exile the creature, and that's really cool. And
it also trades much better on tempo also.
Yeah.
Because and also a pretty important thing that you can actually exile Saga in response to the first chapter, so they won't even get mana off of it.
Yeah, that's this is a nice way to get tempo. Like this exiling Urza Saga is in my opinion, the biggest and most likely the only reason to consider this.
The main reason, definitely.
And like other things are helping the card to make an appearance, to have enough reasons overall to make it happen.
Yep. So we agree that it's like a role player in some decks, and mostly to like group with like Alpine Moon and Spreading Seas to answer Saga, basically like this type of card. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess the card that has been played really heavily at the beginning of Modern Horizons 2 format was Wear and Tear, and then it kind of disappeared. And I think it's a better version of this effect because it can also get like creatures.
Yeah, much better, I would say.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Number 9 on our list is Mnemonic Sphere. It's an artifact for 2 mana, 1 and a blue. It has an activated ability of 1 and a blue to draw 2 cards. So it's an effect that's known from like Hieroglyphic Illumination, or there is the Fortel one that costs 3 mana as well. 4 mana total as well. That I was pretty excited about when Kaldheim came up. How is it called? The Fortel for 2 mana, and you can...
Behold the Multiverse?
Behold the Multiverse, yes, exactly. So this is a similar card that you can... for 4 mana, it draws you 2 cards with upside. And the upside in this case is that it has channel. For 1 blue mana, you can discard it to draw a card. And why this card is interesting in my opinion? Because it serves a bunch of important purposes, in my opinion. First of all, it's a cheap way to get Delirium. Because Artifact is something you already get bubbles, but you only can play 4 bubbles. And this can get you Delirium. It's an artifact, so if you're playing like an affinity deck, you can tap it with Moonsnare Prototype, which we will be talking about later on. And it can be replayed with Lurus. And I think that in case of those effects, like the problem with playing them with Lurus before was that you had to pay 4 mana to get it into your graveyard before. Like similar effects. Like you had to actually play it for the first time from your hand and then pop it, and then you can replay it with Lurus, which costs a lot of mana. And with this card, you can cycle it early or channel it early, and it ends up in your graveyard. It helps your Unholy Heat get better. And then when you are ready to bring it back with Lurus, you just play it, you play Lurus, you play this, and you draw 2 cards. And I think it's a pretty interesting card to play in like slower Grixis deck. I don't think you will play this in Death Shadow. Maybe as a sideboard card, but I don't think so. But in like Grixis control decks or like blue-black control decks with Lurus, I think it's a pretty interesting card to test. Nothing like super great, but I think it will be like a solid role player, like 1 or 2 of.
And personally, I'm not very high on the card. And I don't feel it will see play, but I would be very, very happy if someone will prove that I'm wrong now. So we can probably move on.
Yeah. Number 8 on our list is another member of the March cycle that we've talked about before. It's March of Reckless Joy, which is the red one. And its effect is, of course, it costs X and the red, and you can exile red cards to make it cheaper. And it exiles top X cards of your deck, and until the end of your next turn, you can play 2 of those cards. I don't know if you are choosing on exile or are you choosing later on?
You may play up to 2 of
you
those
may play up
cards.
to 2. Okay, so you can wait and choose whatever you want when you actually are able to play it. So this is basically a variation on like light up the stage. I do think that scaling on this card is really powerful. Like it's like this weird crossover between like light up the stage and like dig through time almost. And I do think that in decks like Obosh, for example, when you have like, I guess you are not playing Lava Dart in Obosh anymore, but still, you can have some low impact cards. For example, you are playing against a deck with few creatures and you have 2 Unholy Heats in hand. You can exile one of those to it. You can exile like spare copies of Ragavan to it.
Blood
Moons, Furies. Like, it's not that hard for this to look at like 5 or 6 cards in the mid game, I think.
True.
And I think it's a really strong selection tool.
Yeah. Especially with Chandra, like for 3 mana. It should give you mana to do this.
Yes.
I think so. Yes. So there's some potential. There's also a potential in other deck that I'm a big fan.
Is it Belcher?
Yeah. I saw a few Belcher players toying with it, and there are like a few things you can do. First, it can be used in Recrospires, although because you can set up your exile, so you will always know what to find. So if you have like a red card to spare, you can end up with being up on mana. And the second thing, in heavy attrition battles, when you want to find Belcher, plus you have like a few cards that are not played at all, like that are close to being dead. In a few situations, you can exile them and try to find Belcher to end the game. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of this. I will still test it, and maybe that there's something I don't see. Maybe I underestimate how good end of turn match of Reckless Joy would be in a control matchup.
Yeah, my biggest issue with that is that you don't have access to free fast mana anymore. And it would be really good with free fast mana when you can just exile and dig for like, or I guess Simian Spirit Guide doesn't work with it, but like Chrome Mox or Rite of Flame, or this type of effect that you actually could set up something this way.
Most likely yes, but like I expect March to nearly always try to find Belcher. And because like all other cards will give you mana, and you can get mana by exiling your useless cards. So it's not the biggest problem, but like the biggest problem is when like after you exile your cards to play March to try to find Belcher, you also need to cast this Belcher and most likely activate it. So it's kind of ambitious. And
what I like, or I guess the scenario that I kind of like, is that you can, on the turn that you reforge, if you have March in hand, you can pitch your whole hand to March, and then you reforge, and you have both cards from reforge and cards from March.
True, cool one.
I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, but it's also kind of like I can't imagine this scenario being played often enough.
Yeah, probably.
Consider
Just
this
saying.
as a
Yep.
like cool trick, but like hard to evaluate at this for now.
True. Okay, moving on. Okay, so next up on the 7th place, we have Michiko's Reign of Truth, which is a saga. I think it's the first. Oh, it's a second saga on our list. We also had Hidetsugu Consumes All, and as you probably know by now, each saga in this set has the same third chapter, or I guess similar third, or like they all have the same third chapter, but the backside of the cards look differently. So the third chapter on all of those is Exile it and Return it transformed, and they're all creatures at the back side. Michiko's Reign of Truth has the same two chapters, or its first two chapters are identical. They have the effect of target creature gains +X until end of turn, where X is the number of artifacts and or enchantments you control. So it's an effect known from like All That Glitters, cards like that. Also similar to like Cranial Plating. And then on 3, it flips into Portrait of Michiko, something like that. I don't remember how it's exactly called. And it's a 0/0 creature with the same text, which is Portrait of Michiko gets +X, where X is the number of artifacts and or enchantments you control. So, yeah, as I said, similar cards to this one are All That Glitters and Cranial Plating. What I do like about Michiko's Reign of Truth is that it's cheaper than Cranial Plating to utilize because it costs 2 mana, not 3 mana. And usually when you get 2 hits with Cranial Plating, you already won the game. So, and also the fact that it can give, like, it's better, it's like best of both worlds when you have Cranial Plating and you have All That Glitters, because it costs 2 mana like All That Glitters, but it's better against removal spells than All That Glitters, because you can target one creature on the first go, and then if they kill it, you can target something else next turn. Plus, at the end, you are getting another creature that's like big. So I do think that this card is really strong.
I think it's really cool. Like you can see play in Hammer, for example.
Yes.
Where they can try to be quite aggressive. I think there's also a way to play blue-white Hammer, like blue-white artifact decks. Affinity style deck. Because like right now, when I was playing Affinity, I had a problem with Cranial Plating because like there was never a good time to play it and equip. So maybe playing this and adding white for example, Esper Sentinel is the way to go. But then the mana can be problematic. Like I think there's something in this blue-white shell with Thought Monitor and like other artifact-based cards. So I would love to see something going on here. The big downside for the card, in my opinion, is that the Portrait of Michiko, after it flips, it doesn't have haste.
Yeah.
So you can't attack it. But like Kaiser already said that like the first and second chapter are kinda hasty attacks.
Yes.
So like this creature, Portrait of Michiko, is more like a super late game threat. Like
it's like
the card
it's like the third
more.
Yeah, it's like the third creature you equip with Cranial Plating, right? You play Plating, you equip the first creature you attack, they kill it, then you re-equip it to your next creature, they kill it, and then you flip Portrait. It's like top decking another creature that they have to kill the next turn.
That's like having another big guy is like always a cool thing. Like,
yeah. Also, I really think that you should play a bunch of those effects with Thought Monitor, because if you have Thought Monitors and Thoughtcasts, and you are just drawing more like Ornithopters and Memnites and stuff like that, then those draw 2s are not that great. But this card draws into something really good. Like it gives you a really good draw, because if your Thought Monitor draws that, and you play it on the next turn, it probably will give your Thought Monitor like +5/+5 at least.
At least.
Because it's like one from itself, one from Fod Monitor is already 2. And how many different like other artifacts you will have? How much mana did you pay for Fod Monitor? 2? 1? If you paid 2 mana for it, you will have 5 other artifacts, which means that Portrait of Michiko or
your Fod Monitor is also an artifact, so it's already 6.
So yeah, it's already this and Michiko's Reign of Truth. So if you had 6 other artifacts and you cast Fod Monitor for 1 mana, as Garfield intended to do, you are getting +8/+8, and your Fod Monitor is 10/10, and you just kill them with 2 turn clock. You just swing twice with 10/10 Monitor, and they are dead.
Yeah, but like before, like we are going to Magical Christmas Land all the way. Let's remind you, Jandrek, that this is an enchantment, and if your deck is heavily focused on having artifacts, then having like too many of these effects can be risky, tricky, etc., etc. Generally speaking, I feel that this card can replace Ingenious Smith in blue-white versions because
for sure, 100%.
Because like this is a like more aggressive approach, so you can play like Memnice Ornithopters with 8 drums. We'll get into that.
You already draw a lot of cards with monitors and podcasts. You don't need more card advantage, like.
Yeah, and this is like Portrait of Michiko is the thing that Ingenious Smith always wanted to be, because it's a 1/1 that slowly grows, and Portrait of Michiko is just huge when it flips.
Yeah, and I do think that it's a valid concern that that it's not an artifact, so it doesn't count towards the affinity. But I do think that having 8 Springleaf drums with monster prototypes will pull a lot of weight because they are like essentially adding 2 mana, right? Because it's an artifact itself and it taps for mana. And the fact that you can, like, it will be hard to flood on those effects for you, because you can even tap Springleaf drums for monster prototypes if you draw too many of them and too few creatures. You can tap like Mishra's Bubble. You can tap welding jars and stuff like this for monster prototype to get you mana. So yeah, I am kind of excited about Affinity. I think Affinity got a bunch of good cards in this set.
Yeah, I was a fan of the strategy. Like, okay, I was never I was a fan of the strategy, but other archetypes were cooler to play with. And right now, like, there are enough new cards to try to build a new era Affinity, because like it won't have Ravager, it won't have Steel Overseers, like stuff like that, but it can present you enough other cards.
Yeah, it actually has Affinity cards in it.
Yeah, actual Affinity in Affinity.
Also, another addition to this deck from Kamigawa that's not on the list but might be a good like tool for the sideboard is Takemushi.
Like this 3 mana to 3?
That can bring return stuff to bring back sagas. Because
I'm not
the fact that you can play it with with white floating and return saga that just died, I think is really powerful. Because it can bring back saga.
Yes, but like I don't think you need to pay 3 mana for your 2/3.
I'm not saying it's a main deck card. Yeah, I'm not saying it's a main deck card by any means. Sure. But some people have been playing like weird artifact decks with like Crucible of Words to bring back sagas as a way to grind out your opponent. And I do think that it's a significant upgrade over Crucible of Words if you want to do stuff like this.
Yes, but you won't find this with Oswald, because like earlier we were playing Crucible of Words because you could tutor for it. So
yeah, that's true. But it also it first ability that draws you a card. It triggers when a permanent is returned to hand. How it works?
Yes,
I don't. So you can play it.
This is our secret tier, because like I feel we'll talk about the card a bit. Tameshi Reality Architect, 3 mana legendary creature Moonfold Wizard. Whenever one or more non-creature permanents are returned to hand, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn.
And also something that, of course, it couldn't be one of our videos without mentioning Dominar's Judgment. They were already talking about how it's called Takemeshi. Okay, Tameshi is that it works quite well with Ether Spellbomb because you can draw cards on your opponent's turn as well, and you can find Ether Spellbomb with Urza's Saga that you want to bring back anyways, and you can protect Tameshi with this Ether Spellbomb. So I think it's a bunch of, like, from the perspective of somebody who just likes to fight against Affinity with a bunch of Kolaghan's commands and Unholy Heat and stuff like that, that's really hard to do against this kind of angle. So
yeah, Affinity will draw a lot of cards.
Affinity will draw a shit ton of cards. And
okay, and there's a second ability which is kind of important. For X and white mana.
Oh yeah,
and return a land you control to its owner's hand. You can return target artifact or enchantment card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. So
most importantly, you can pay one white mana and return a land you control to your hand to draw a card from its first ability and return Saga to the battlefield. That's like the big thing that people are excited about with this card.
Yeah, still you can also, for example, return Mishra's Bubble. Also, reasonable thing to do. Plus, like, returning a land means that you are drawing from Tameshi. So, like, I still think that these decks will like to operate on a lot of mana. So, like, bouncing your lands over and over again is not exactly what you want to do because, like, these decks will be mana hungry.
Yeah, but you are bouncing a land to bring back a land quite often. So you will be mana neutral.
Quite often, yes, but like not all the time.
That's true.
Still, an effect that can be powerful, but I'm a bit worried that, like, we are still talking about a 3 mana card that can be killed for 1
Once again, I think in Affinity, in particular, it will be more of a sideboard option than a main deck card. But nonetheless, it's kind of interesting, and I'm looking forward to how it develops. Okay, so on number 6, we are closing out the first half of the list. We have Takenuma, and how's it called? Takenuma.
Give me a second. I will help you. Takenuma Abandoned Mire.
Abandoned Mire. Okay. Abandoned Mire. Yeah. So Takenuma Abandoned Mire is the first of the legendary lands that we have on our list. All of those lands are legendary lands that can tap for 1 mana of each color. Like, so this is a black one. We have 5 of them in the set, and they all have channel ability. They enter the battlefield untapped, so there is little downside usually to play with them over basics in decks that have few colors, like 1 or 2 colors. You will just play them. That's like a baseline. If you are playing like Yawgmoth, you will play a Boseiju or 2. We'll get to Boseiju in a second. If you are playing Merfolk, you will play a shit ton of Otawara. If you are playing like Red-Black, you will play like probably 2 Takenuma and like 1 Sokenzan, which is the red one. So yeah, and the effect on this particular one is channel. You pay 4 mana, including 1 black, to mill 3 cards, and then you may return a creature card from a graveyard to your hand, and it has a cost-reducing mechanic. All of those lands have the same cost-reducing mechanic, which is their channel ability costs 1 less for each legendary creature you control. Okay, so I do think that this will be a big deal in Lurrus Mirrors. In black-based Lurrus Mirrors, recurring Lurrus is by far the most important thing. If your Lurrus is gone because they have like Spellbomb or something like this, then the game becomes significantly harder to win. And that's why people are playing a bunch of Kolaghan's commands in their deck. and sideboarding, like Death Shadow plays one main deck and then sideboards even more because you want to get your Lurus going. They will kill the first time usually because everybody plays a lot of removal spells, and they will kill the first time, but you will get something back. And then they might kill it second time, but once again, you are getting something back. And usually on the third go, they just run out of removal spells, and you already like drawn a bunch of extra cards with it. So yeah, I think this will be a quite a big deal for black-based Lurus decks in general.
Yeah, and like we should also talk a bit more when we could see these lands played, because like at the like right after they like shown like Enjanio, Seed of the Empire, the White Land. Thanks. And then Boseju, like everyone, including myself, fell into the trap of thinking about these lands something like for free. It can be easily played, and
Sodek was the first Doomsayer of Boseju.
Yeah, I still feel
he was a 4-color player for like a week on paper. He was just saying, I'm just playing 4-color. There is no reason to play anything else than 4-color from now on. I will just buy all the cards for 4-color and I will play it till the end of my days. And you know, Boseju is super broken. And it's definitely a strong card, but it's not as good.
Yeah, and like at the end of the day, these are still like War's basics, like from perspective. If you are playing more than 2 colors, like 3 or 4 or even 5, you don't want to play lands that taps for 1 mana. And if you are playing basics in your deck already with fetch lands, there are like 2 main reasons to play basics. First, because the alternatives are triumphs or shock lands, so you are losing tempo or life. So basic is a way to not get a pain, like not get a land and not lose a tempo or
yeah,
life.
You're not basically you don't want to get behind on tempo.
Yeah, and second thing, you can play around things like Blood Moon. In another scenario, your dual land should be better than your basic. And once you realize that, once I realized that playing basic lands is a luxury, not something that you actively want to do, because like you want to cast your spells as easy as that. And once I realized that, I started to think about these lands that they aren't that good because they are not that easy to add them. Like Jędrek already like said it in like our Polish podcast. Yeah, I was listening to it, and remember what did you say about me and my spłakanie on Boseju? And like this is a cool way to reward someone playing like for one with 1 or 2 color. And Takenuma is a like great example of that. Like it's a really powerful effect in the right deck, and like you will nearly always have something to return because there's Lurus around. And as long as you can pay the cost of having the land that taps for only 1 color, you're good to go. And I feel that we'll see Takenuma and all of these lands in like 1 copies in many different decks. So
I do think that even in like 3-4 color decks, you can play one of those probably. In most cases.
Yeah.
And then maybe like I am planning on trying out Otawara and Grixis, like 1 copy. And then I'm playing with another one in the sideboard as still like in some matchups you want to make your land drops more than in other. So you can always like board up a land. And then you have like it might be honestly the best answer to Blood Moon and Grixis. Because you don't want like engineered explosives.
We are talking about Takenuma right now.
Yeah, but I'm like jumping ahead to Otawara. Like, so I guess I'm gonna save it for the time.
Yeah, sure. Like I also wanted to say something about like all lands. Generally speaking, if you like hide the aspect of that being a land and just think about it as a spell, they are quite weak ones. Like these effects are not very powerful. That means that you can that's not something you want to cast on you want to use because channel is not a cast. That want to spend mana on in your early turns. These effects will most likely be the last thing you will do. Like if you don't have any other ways to you spend your mana, you will use these lands, or if there are like very specific situation when your land is used for like very exact purpose. For instance, you are playing Takenuma, you have Lurus in graveyard, and you need your Lurus. That's the way. Or you are playing so Kenzan, opponents at 2, so having 2 creatures to attack is a game-winning play, etc., etc. So this like combination of weak land and weak effect chained together gives you like a pretty good card overall.
I do think that those lands are better than you give them credit for. Maybe. Like the land part of it. I think an untapped land is...
Yeah, the land, like we will never think about these cards being playable in Modern if not the land part. So land part is like sure. essential to even think about these as like, as playable things. We also like should mention again the channel can't be countered by like regular counter spells. So
and it's not stopped by Teferi, which will be important later on.
Yeah. So like there are like numerous small things that like if you think about them like together, like as a like all many things on one piece of paper, that suddenly means that like the card is really good.
Yeah.
And like I'm not a Lurus player myself, so I can only imagine how Takenuma is good, and I feel that Jendrik can say more about it. Overall, all these lands will be played. If you have an option to buy them early in your pre-release events or like early drafts, do it. You will play these lands a lot.
Don't do it. Don't do it, or don't buy Boseju because it's terribly overpriced right now.
Okay, Boseju maybe
it's like people are asking like it's a rare. It's not a mythic rare. It's a rare from standard legal set, and people are listing it on card market for like 25 euros or whatever. It's like it won't cost that many. It will cost like 10 euros because it's a rare. Once again, it's a rare. Okay, and in general, I do think that Takenuma is strong. It's strong with lures. The biggest downside of Takenuma as a land is that it's a black land in your expressive iteration deck, which really sucks. And it's not a swamp, and you can justify swamp by it being a basic. So I think in expressive iteration black decks, that might be a tougher ask. But I think in like
red black Seekers,
red black in Giant Saga with Rensky also pretty strong effect. So
yeah, like we also like forgot to mention that like all these lands will make Vren a much better card, because earlier Vren was already a very strong playable planeswalker because it could kill 1-drops with 1 toughness, because it could like make sure that with combination of fashions you have enough 1-drops. Sometimes it was used to cycle with like Forgotten Cave, Tranquil Ticket, whatever, just to make use of this extra land.
So to basically get spells with Ren.
Yeah, that's and like getting spells is better than getting lands, especially like the game. Most of the time, like if you don't. Okay, whatever. But these lands are the very easy way to get spells from Ren. Okay, so these are like a real card advantage.
That's true. So to move to our 5th place on the list. We have the Reality Chip, which is probably the card with the most ridiculous type line in the history of Magic.
Okay,
it's
I can.
legendary equipment creature, a legendary artifact creature equipment jellyfish or jellyfish equipment, which is like
Equipment jellyfish.
Equipment jellyfish. Yeah, it's like okay. So what it does? It costs 2 mana, including 1 blue, and it's a 0/4, and it has a static ability of you may look at the top card of your library at any time. It has another static ability. As long as the reality chip is equipped or attached to a creature, you may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. And it has a reconfigure for 2 and a blue. Reconfigure is basically like equip. You can attach it to a creature for the reconfigure cost, and as long as it's attached to a creature, it's not a creature itself. So it's basically a play on future sight, which is an effect that has been powerful in the past, Magic. Playing cards from the top of your deck gives you a lot of card advantage over the course of even if you untap with it, if you have fetch lands in your deck, so you can reset the top of your deck, it will be hard to win against an active reality chip if it goes for 2 turns, usually. And conveniently, we have a deck in Modern. And this card is compatible with Lurus, which is a really big deal, because we have a deck in Modern that plays Lurus, that plays equipments. And some people have been splashing blue in this deck already, and it's Hammer. And you can play 1 copy of Reality Chip. And then you can get it with Stoneforge Mystic, you can get it with Steel Shaper's Gift if you want to go back to this card. And it can just draw a lot of cards in this deck.
Yeah, what's also very important is that both Sigarda's 8 and Pure Steel Paladin lets you cheat on reconfigure, because Sigarda's 8 makes you just attach the equipment jellyfish in this situation to any creature, and Pure Steel Paladin has a very strange wording, means that all equipments you have gain equip 0. So even if the reality chip relies on the reconfigure, it still will get equip 0. So with these 2 effects, you can negate the aspect of paying 5 mana total.
Yeah, definitely. If you can circumvent the additional 3 mana to pay, this card becomes way better. I do think that even without, I think this is possibly a card that is playable even not in Hammer. I do think that it's a card that can be played in blue-white Stoneforge Mystic decks, for example, if somebody wants to play it. I also really like that both Reality Chip and Lion Sash are equipments that can be played with Stoneforge Mystic and Lurus. So you can play blue-white Stoneblade with Lurus maybe. Which was also it was always a problem to play white mid-range deck with Lurus, in the similar vein of Grisis, playing, for example, a Jeskai Lurus deck, because you didn't have any good creatures in white, because you couldn't play Stoneforge Mystic for Battle Skull and stuff. And with those equipments being 2 mana, and you can play them with Lurus, and also they are a creature, and you can Stoneforge Mystic for a creature, which is really good in some situations, because you're just getting threats. Even if your Stoneforge Mystic gets killed and you get Lion Sash, that once again we will talk about later a bit, you can still get another creature, and that's really, really good. So Reality Chip, pretty good. Agreed. Okay.
Yeah, the only problem with chip I see is that if you spend your mana and resources to equip the creature, and the opponent will have the creature removal.
We're getting so far behind on tempo.
Yeah. So
also the problem, I think. I think the problem with chip is also that its front side is really unappealing. If 0-4 creature is not something you want to really play in your deck.
Unlike it does not have defender, so you can attack and represent the hammer equip.
Yeah, that's true. But like unlike something like Lion Sash, which is a pretty decent creature by itself. So I do think that this problem with this issue of reality chip will prevent it. It's also legendary, and the other equipments aren't of those reconfigured cycle. So I think it's something to keep in mind as well. But this is the type of effect that you wouldn't play more than like one copy anyways, maybe two. So
yeah, like I wouldn't even be surprised if we see reality chip on the inside boards, for example, because in Hammer, after all, like your main plan is to just kill quite fast. Like it's, you know, not always can happen because, you know, people are always playing removal and, you know, other interactive ways to stop you. But like reality chip is something that will let you convert your your like shitty creatures. For example, like people are cutting ornithopters all the time. Like Atlassian was playing 0 copies, and right now with reality chip, playing ornithopterski is a bit better because like, you have just more cheap friends you can present to cheap.
Yeah, that's true that it doesn't really play that well with your main plan, but also you are playing Ingenious Smith in Hammer, and how much better is first reality chip than first Ingenious Smith?
Oh, much better, I would say.
I think pretty substantially. So yeah, high hopes for this card. And let's move on to another artifact that we have on our list. Number 4 is Moonsnare Prototype, which is an artifact for 1 blue mana. It has an activated ability of tap this, tap an untapped artifact or creature you control to add a colorless mana. And it has a channel ability, which is not super important, but it's a nice upside, which is 4 and a blue, so 5 mana total, to choose. You are choosing a creature, I think, or non-permanent.
The owner of target non-permanent puts
okay.
it on the top or bottom on the
So an effect that's already familiar for most modern players from like Ethergas or Subtlety. You're choosing a non-permanent, and then they decide whether it goes to top or bottom. So it's the most important thing about this card is that it's basically Springleaf Drum 5 to 8. It's not exactly Springleaf Drum. Sometimes it will be worse, usually. Sometimes it will be better. And also, I do think that because we were so spoiled with Mox Opal all those years, we kind of dismissed how strong of a card Springleaf Drum is. Like, Springleaf Drum is pretty strong.
Yeah, that's true.
Like from time to time, when I'm playing with Archmage Sharp and I'm stealing Springleaf Drum, and I can tap my Snapcaster for mana, I'm like, wow, that's pretty fucking strong. Why am I not doing this more often? Like,
there's some reasons. About the Moonsnare Prototype versus Springleaf Drum, these cards looks quite similar to each other, but in reality there are like many different things that are like completely different. First, Moonsnare Prototype costs blue mana compared to Springleaf Drum costing 1 gray. Gray, like colorless, whatever. Generic facts. And like this is a huge deal already because like I'm thinking about the affinity style decks. And I really wanted them to be really good. There are 2 things that are kind of poor with it. Like Springleaf Drum was much easier to cast, so it enabled like in early game it was easy to cast Springleaf Drum, then Ornithopter, Memnet, whatever. Then you could cast, for example, Thoughtcast early or anything that's important. In this situation, that's the opposite. You need to have your blue mana early to cast this, and then you can't play your other like colored
cards. But there's also upsides. You can also tap your untapped artifacts. So that means that you are not forced, at least you won't be that forced to play that many extremely shitty creatures, because like Ornithopter or Memnite aren't the most powerful threats in the game ever. And you can play only 8 of them. So if you want to play more than 8 0 mana creatures, you have to rely on something like Frogmite. That's for like technically for mana, so it won't always be for free. Or you need to pay mana for your creatures, so your Moonstone prototype slash Spring Drum can create the mana. So there are like different things you can do. Still, playing, for example, Moonstone prototype, Mishra's Bubble, tapping Mishra's Bubble, or like Welding Jar to get your extra mana to make this like engine going, to have more early artifacts early on, so your Thoughtcast can be cast for 1 mana on turn 2, which is in my opinion very important. Because it lets you play Urza's Saga turn 2, then you activate, etc. Like this will be a big deal. What I don't like about Monster Prototype, the more like compared to Spring Drum, the most powerful starts from Spring Drum in Affinity lists was playing Urza's Saga turn 1, then you played Spring Drum, then you could play a creature and represent like 3 mana on turn 2, so you can create a construct, then on turn 3 you create another construct and tutor for something. And that's something you can't do with Muslim Prototype unless you like do very ambitious things like turn 1 Spring Drum into 0 into Muslim Prototype. But that's not the case. Like with Muslim Prototype you can't play with the Saga turn 1 to enable it on like turn 3 tutor effect. So there are some things that are like cards are different from each other, but overall I will start playing like full 8 copies of both. And there's a way that like with all these like all that glitters effect with like Esper Sentinel, etc., maybe there's a way to build an 8-cast deck with Moonstep Prototype, but without Spring Drums, or like with fewer copies of it. So you won't be forced to play that many Memnite Ornithopters, and with more portable holes, with more like other like just good cards, and try to play this way, maybe even with Urza, maybe even with Top Tier Foundry and sort of the mid combo. There's like many things I want to test, and I'm really hyped about the card. In my opinion, this is like the most interesting cards. Like this is the card that unlocks the biggest amount of deck building opportunities, I would say. About the channel ability, I think it can be really good, because like I would play Moonstone Prototype even without the second ability, and now I get the removal effect, even if it's a bit overcosted. That's something I would love to see in this type of deck that lacks this type of effect. And you can even cheat on this channel effect that it won't technically cost 5, because there's a lot of Spring Drum and Moonstone Prototypes you can have in play. So you won't tap 5 mana for it, you will tap like 4 or maybe 3. Plus there's also Urza's ability. If you play Urza's how does that say?
Lord High Artificer.
Yeah, thanks. You can play it just from your artifacts, and I feel it's really powerful. It's something I would like to see in the future.
Okay. So, what do you think about Mox Amber with Prototype?
Mox Amber with Prototype.
You can type it. You can tap it to Prototype. Portrait of Michiko is legendary, I'm pretty sure. You can play Emery, which is already good with many Spring Drums and like Mishra's Bubbles and stuff like this. Maybe you are getting somewhere this way.
Maybe like about Mox Amber, like obviously Mox Amber as a 0 mana
I
spell
feel like
with Moonlight prototype is a cool thing. But the biggest question is how good Mox Amber will be just as a Mox Amber. How many legendary effects, legendary like creatures or planeswalkers, will you have in the deck, and
not many,
how
but but I think the floor that's acceptable on 0 mana artifact in Affinity is pretty low. Like you can play some really bad cards just because they are 0 mana artifacts. And once you start going, once you get going, and you have like Portrait of Michiko and stuff like this, you can use this sudden burst of mana. Like you are drawing a lot of cards and you want to draw, like drawing Moxen if you are drawing a lot of cards is really, really good. So as I'm saying, maybe you don't want to play a shit ton of those. Maybe you want to play
like two
of those. Maybe you want to play Sai in the deck because you are getting more artifacts.
Sai is also like something that's really good in 8 cast in Legacy, and with Moonlight prototype, like with 8 drum effects, overcosted things can be a thing, I think. Because like the problem with Sai in Modern, it's like for 3 mana and there's some holy hit around, or any other removal can kill it. So
I think with Sai,
so ramping it on turn 2 is something that I like doing. I feel
I think there is a possibility of building a mono blue 8 cast deck just like in Legacy with the amount of things, because then that's one of the solutions to the inconvenient cost on prototype, because your mana base would be just Sagas, Darksteel Citadels, and then blue sources, and you have like, I don't know, 10 or 12 blue lands plus Springleaf Drums, which is like okay. And then you can play Sai, you can play maybe
more
Emry.
card draws, more things, then Sai will draw more cards.
You don't get to play Michiko's Reign of Truth, which is a good card, of course, but you can just play Nettlesis, which is like a similar effect. It costs more mana, sure, but it's also a colorless card, so you don't have to double the second color.
On the other hand, I feel that Esper Sentinel is exactly what the deck would like to see.
I think Esper Sentinel is incredibly overhyped. I think as we talked, I don't know if we are talking about it with you 2 weeks ago or with Canister last week on our Polish
I think
podcast.
with Canister. I think it was with
Sentinel. Yeah, I think this is something that Canister brought up. That Sentinel is a really good in Hammer because you are actually punishing your opponent for wasting tempo to kill it for like 2 mana, and you are not doing it that effectively in Affinity. And also, like, if Esper Sentinel was costing blue mana and you don't have to splash for it, I would be all about it. And I think this is like an important part of Hammer. It's a white creature, so you play it. If Esper Sentinel was costing blue mana or red mana, you wouldn't play it in Hammer.
True.
Because it's not on color. So I think Esper Sentinel is a good thing to play if you are playing white, but it's not a reason to splash. That's what I'm saying.
Like going forward, I want to play mono blue, very aggressive artifact based deck with Mirror Enforcer stuff, and like maybe cranial plating still. There's also a mono blue with Sai, which I feel it can be really good. There's also a blue white with maybe Sai, but like just like a good mid range deck that can just play.
I wonder if you can play. I wonder if you can play like a Stompy-ish kind of deck. You can play like Ethereum Sculptor to make your artifact cheaper, and then you can play like Lodestone Golem with 8 Springleaf Drums. Maybe something in this area.
Maybe.
We'll see.
It sounds really cool, actually.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a way, and there's also a way to build blue-white artifact deck with the Top Tier Foundry Mimic and Urza's combo.
Yeah. Also,
prototype.
Yeah. Also, if you are playing mono blue, you can play more Otawaras, which is the next card on our list that we will go to right now.
Nice.
So Otawara, City in Clouds, I think it's official name, because it was translated from Japanese as Otawara Heavenly City first, and I don't think that's its actual name.
I see Otawara Soaring City.
Soaring City. Okay.
Soaring City.
Is it on Mythic Spoiler?
Yeah. So maybe that's a bit different. Otawara is the most important.
If it's on Mythic Spoiler, then it's true most of the time. Let me check. Yeah. Otawara Soaring City. Yeah. Okay. I don't like this name. City in the Skies would be better, or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's a blue land. It enters the battlefield untapped. It's a legendary land that taps for blue, and it has channel ability for 4 mana, 3 and a blue. You discard Otawara, and you return target creature, artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker, I think.
Artifact,
creature enchantment, or planeswalker,
yes.
to its own essence. So basically, each types of non-land permanents that there are, but you can also bounce Saga, thanks to this. Like it's a strictly better wording than non-land permanent, because you are covering every type, and then you can bounce like manlands and sagas and stuff like that. And this ability costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature you control. So I think that, as we've talked before with Takemuna, or even Takenuma, those lands will be playable in 1 and 2 color mana, 1 and 2 color decks for sure. We will play, I don't know, 3 of those in Merfolk probably, because Merfolks are just super shitty, and like you can just play. Our friend who's playing Merfolk told me that he'll just play 4 of them. I don't know if 4 isn't too much, but maybe it's not. Maybe you need all the help you can get when you are playing fishes. But like in Grixis, I will play 1 copy. In Blue-White, you will play like 1 or 2 copy definitely. But the most important, I think, place for this land is Cascade decks, because Cascade decks can't play cheap spells because, well, they're playing Cascade cards, and you need to rely on them always hitting the thing you want to hit, be it Living End, be it Rhinos, be it even Glimpse, which is historically a deck that can't really play this type of effect because they can't play non-permanent cards like instants or sorceries because of how Glimpse works. And this is actually a land that also can be used in a like spell fashion, which is really, really good in that deck, even though like Glimpse is the worst of those 3 decks probably. So yeah, that's what I said probably. So yeah, I think the fact that it would be most important in Living End, I would say, but also pretty great in other decks. I do think that you will play like 2 copies of this land in the Cascade decks. I really do, especially I think especially in Rhinos, because in Rhinos you want to play a fair amount of lands because you want to hardcast your Furies and stuff like that later on.
Yeah.
So you are actually.
I think that Rhinos can easily play 2. In Living End, that's a bit more ambitious because you also need sources for your Cascade card.
Yeah, and you are playing like what, 19 lands, 20 lands in Living End, 20 probably.
19, even 18 sometimes.
Okay, and Rhinos play like 24.
Yeah, so it's easier to play. But my first feel is that Otawara is something that can be like something I would like to see instead of Brazen Borrower. I think that cutting Brazen Borrower, like the first one that's played in Living End, is neatly free, because I would like to have some form of bounce effects. Obviously, this costs 4 mana compared to 2, can't attack by like being a free 1, etc. But having an answer to Teferi is so fucking huge for the deck that I would sacrifice this like all small upsides of Brazen Borrower just to have an uncounterable answer for Teferi. Especially if like people with Teferi on board are much more aggressive with tap outs.
Yeah, they will just tap out because they think there is nothing that can punish them, and you will just use it EOT
Otavara, then you play Living End, and even if they cast like anything else later on, like you have Greaves, you have like just a lot of power on board, and usually that will be enough. I can like also Otavara taps for blue. That also means that like all your cyclers can be cycled thanks to this land. Like for instance, I hate playing Forest in Living End. Like it's a really good land. I really like it. I really like using it as a like way to beat Blood Moon, to way to not lose life when I'm going for Shardless Agent, etc. But not being able to keep one landers or slowing down your two landers just because you can't cycle with Forest was embarrassingly bad. And Otavara does not have this type of problems. It just really like maybe not the really good card, just the effect the deck needed to make it powerful.
So what you're saying is that you need a blue-green cycler for Forest to be truly amazing.
Yes, that's true.
Okay. Okay, so next up, we are moving towards our second place on the list, which is Boseju, Who Endures, which is a green legendary land. It taps for green, and it has channel ability for 1 and a green, so only 2 mana. It's the cheapest of all of those, and also that was probably the reason why it was most hyped. It destroys up to 1 target or 1 target, it doesn't matter.
Destroy target
artifact, enchantment, or non-basic lands an opponent's control. Am I saying something wrong, or are you just...
No, I'm just like once again feeling this
okay.
pain when I started to
artifact, enchantment, or non-basic lands an opponent's control, and its controller can search their library for a land with a basic land type. So it can be a basic, a Triumph, or a shock land, a Mistwale Plains if you want it. It can be Dwarvenmire if you're playing against creativity. And they put it into play untapped, so it works with Dwarvenmire. And of course, this ability is cheaper for each legendary creature you control, as always with those lands. Okay, I will just mute myself and let Sodek rant about it for like 5 minutes, no more than that, because we are already almost an hour and a half into this video. So just say what you have to say, Sodek.
Okay. Let's start the journey. Let's start the beautiful but also terrifying story about Boseju. Once I saw the card, I started reading it. I was like, destroy artifact, enchantment. That's extremely cool. That's like so many opportunities. Like it's on the land, all good. And then I read non-basic land, and it was extremely sad for me because, like, once I realized that this effect can be looped with Ren, I realized that Belcher is not that. Does not have that good matchup with 4-color anymore, because like I was thinking that OMG, this is so powerful that will like all 4-color decks will play it, like 3 copies main deck, 1 copy sideboard, or like 2/2, like 4 in 75 is like the only way to play it. And like I was very mad and furious about that, and like I was saying, like this is the end of Belcher. I'm playing only 4-color because like Vren is overpowered, Vren will be banned, whatever. And I was like ranting a lot about that. But then I started like, thanks Henrik for your way to describe how like wrong I was, because then I started like reading what's left on the card. Like they let you search in your library for a land. Obviously, from Belcher player perspective, like this was kind of irrelevant because like Belcher does not play.
I think it was even insulting to you.
Yeah, kinda. Like because like from a Belcher player perspective, who convinced himself that this land will be played everywhere, like giving you a land like wasn't a thing that you wanted to see. I wanted, for example, to see this channel for 3 mana or like exile after you use it, or whatever.
Or you create a treasure instead of search for a land.
Yeah, like that would be nice actually. And once I realized that this card gives you a land back, not only a basic land, but like, you know, like your most likely best land you have in the deck, and even enters the battlefield untapped. Like I started to realize that this card is overhyped because obviously it's really good versus Belcher and noobs, and like it's like when you just flip it with Vren, it just single like this one card can destroy you with like when compared when paired with Vren. But against many other decks, it's not something that's extremely powerful because you're paying mana and like resources to loop the card that will give the opponent mana all the time. So eventually, if you starting looping it too early, it will like give the opponent so much mana that it will like take over the game, but just having more lands in play early. And like sure, there will be still situations, for example, when Hammer player will just lose to Boseju plus Vren, because like Boseju will destroy the first Hammer, then they will struggle to kill earlier, and then Boseju, after Boseju they will not have enough basics, plus like 4-color player will have enough lands to fight with this like mana advantage. So this won't be a problem. Sometimes you lose the discard, sure, but it's not like that the Boseju will be played everywhere. It's not the case. Like we were talking about like why these legendary 1-color lands aren't like auto include as a 4-off everywhere, because like this is a cost of playing them. The effect by itself is also weaker compared to, for example, Force of Vigor. If you are siding in your anti-artifact, anti-enchantment cards, it's better to play something more powerful. That's something that can also be a land. So Boseju, while really good, and it for sure will play in formats, because like after all, it's an uncounterable way to deal with problematic artifacts or enchantments. So for instance, Amulet players can deal with Blood Moon much easier right now, because this is an untapped green source that always was a problem for the deck. And suddenly this untapped green source can also deal with the most problematic card.
I think it's specifically great in Amulet because you can play it as a untapped green source and then you can bounce it with bounce lands. In general, I do think that Boseju will be the best, or at its best, in those land-focused, mostly green decks. Like Amulet, like Tron, like Valakut. Those types of decks. And this is also something that, as always, the fine gentleman from Dominaria's Judgment mentioned. You can play, like with Boseju, you can play more lands in Titan Shift or Valakut, or however you want to call the red-green deck. And then when you start adding additional lands to your deck to like, you don't have 27 lands, but you have like 30 or something, then Arboreal Grazer is much better because you will always have a land to put. So
true.
So who knows? Who knows?
Your Dryad is also better. Generally speaking, decks that like land smatter decks.
Yeah, I think it's it's like a ramp deck card mostly. Yeah. It will be okay with Ren, and sometimes it will win the game, but it won't be the end of Belcher or whatever.
I also think that's true. Like I most likely think that this like Boseju will play in one copy for color decks, because after all this effect is kind of wide. Like artifact or enchantment by itself is something that you will quite often see in modern. Sure. It's also like having this effect in game one is also kind of cool.
Yeah, it's a very low opportunity cost thing.
Yeah, because like if you are playing versus like heavy like creature based deck, you just play it as a land and you didn't lose the card. Like you wouldn't play disenchant in the main deck, but playing a land that can be
also,
a disenchant.
in 4-color, you do have Abundant Growth. And you can just enchant a mono green land to tap for any color of mana.
Yeah.
And you can even reset those Abundant Growths with like Yorion or Teferi if you had it on like Shockland before. So yeah, definitely in my opinion, something, that's a very powerful card that will be widely played, but not nearly as good as Sodek was trying to convince me like a week ago or something before he went snowboarding, and he came back with his mind cleared.
And that's
and
much easier.
No fear of Boseju anymore in his heart.
Yeah, like still this card will be played. You will see this card. Basel players will absolutely hate it. I already know that. And like Oops players will hate it even more because like it's even harder for them to come back after the mana is attacked. So yeah, sure.
Okay.
Let's be it.
Okay. Are we ready for the number 1 card on our list?
Let's go.
Okay. It can be kind of controversial. Like I think putting Boseju on number 1 was just an easy thing to do.
Very lazy thing
to do. I do think that even if you want to put Boseju and Otawara above that card, I think it should be in top 3. And this card is Lion Sash, which is a artifact creature lion equipment.
Cat
equipment, sorry. It costs 1 and a white. It has an activated ability of white. Exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a permanent card, not creature like Scavenging Good, a permanent, so it comes fetch lands and bubbles and stuff, put a 1/1 counter on Lion Sash. It has reconfigure for 2 colorless, and equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each +1/+1 counter on Lion Sash. So it's a card that's similar to Scavenging Goose, but also is an equipment. So you can find the Stoneforge Mystic, and you can just use it to bolster your creatures. I do think that I have really high hopes of Lion Sash. I think Lion Sash will be a fundamental part of how Hammer beats Lurus decks. I think it's also a pretty good card in the mirror because it stops Lurus recursion on like Seal of Cleansing or Qatar Commando or anything else. So it also has the potential to be a really big threat, and you can just start attaching it to your other cards and having other big threats to outmuscle your opponent. It's basically like Nettlesin that you can play alongside Lurus, right? Because it's just a big pump to your creatures and it costs 2 mana, not 3. Overall, I'm a big fan of this card. And it even has this like Nettlesis effect of you have it like equipped to itself on the like entrance. So really good card.
The like what's annoying is that with like outside being a really like big threat, like I like this reminds me a bit of the story when someone played Stone Sisters with Ajani Pridemate and said that Ajani Pridemate is a new Tarmogoyf, and this Ajani Pridemate was enormous all the time. The camera was catching the deck going. And this will be very similar with Lion Sash. Lion Sash left unchecked will grow instantly. It will nearly always be, really big. Still, there's a lot of removal and there's a possibility to kill it, etc. But so as like 20 other cards in Hammer.
And you can play multiple of those. You can play like 2 copies easily.
Yeah, and I feel that first Lion Sash is an auto include. Like some people are playing Cranial Plating right now, and Lion Sash looks just much better because like Cranial Plating is better on the same turn you've casted it, but Lion Sash, the later the game goes on, the better it will be. And like the fact that you can attack the graveyard is so important because Hammer wasn't the deck that was like historically very high on removal, and the way to beat Hammer was to, for example, destroy Shadow Spear, stop Lurus, and then you could jump with like one creature, like a huge Hammer Boy, and keep casting your big guys from Lurus. This was the way. But right now, this can be stopped by Lion Sash. Like opponent's Lurus, nie problem.
Nie problem.
Nie problem.
Also, you can stop Ren recurring Boseju. You can stop. You can like maybe not stop but shrink Living End's graveyard also with this card, which is a tough matchup for Hammer.
The Lion Sash alone forces you to act on Living End. Because like the longer the Lion Sash will be in the play, the less relevant your cycle actions will be.
Yes.
So I totally see this card being, a reasonable thing.
Yeah, and
still, like if you are on a draw, you play Lion Sash, opponent plays Cascade, and the game is kind of over. Maybe not over because then you can try to present, a threat with the Hammer, survive, then attach Shadow Spear and come back to the game.
Yeah.
But like all these like tiny, like yet another puzzle to stop like graveyard counters decks.
Yeah. And also if you have Lion Sash attached to a creature, it doesn't die to Living End. Because it's an equipment, not a creature.
What? Yeah, that's true. So... still like reconfigure like from time to time you like, for example, with the reality chip, we were most likely talking about
it's being an equipment.
Yeah, being an equipment, how to cheat the configure cost, etc., etc. Lion Sash can be just played as a creature and will be good enough.
Both sides of Lion Sash are good.
Yeah,
which is great. All right, I think that's it. So to reiterate, our list is, first of all, honorable mentions are Careful Cultivation, Mirror Shell Club, and Hidetsugu Consumes All. Then, number 10 is March of Otherworldly Light. Number 9 is Mnemonic Sphere. Number 8 is March of Reckless Joy. Number 7 is Michiko's Reign of Truth. Number 6 is Takenuma Abandoned Mire. Number 5 is Reality Chip, or The Reality Chip. Number 4 is Monster Prototype. Number 3 is Otawara. I refuse to call it Soaring City. Number 2 is Boseju Who Endures. And number 1 is Lion Sash. How it actually pans out, we'll see. Maybe it's pretty likely that Boseju end up being the most impactful card, and some people will laugh at us. But as we said before, I think picking Boseju for the number 1 card was kind of lazy and easy, and we both have really high hopes for Lion Sash. So
we like about the placements and the list, like predicting cards, like how impactful they will be is very hard. And I think I learned in a hard way that making mistakes and overhyping cards is a very easy way to
get laughed at.
Get laughed at. Like remember this 4-mana enchantment that I would say that it will destroy Modern?
Song of Creativity?
Yeah, Song of Creation, probably.
Song of Creation, yeah.
Song of Creation. Like, I was super hyped about the card. I was thinking about like making a buyout just to have it.
Okay, so in general, those lists are hard to predict, and basically it doesn't really matter what ended up at the first place. Like, we think that all cards on this list, like if any of those cards end up being good, we wouldn't be surprised, right? So those cards all have potentials in the format. So we will be back next week with, I don't think the metagame update for February. I think we'll wait one more week to get more Kamigawa results.
Yeah, like one week of Kamigawa plays right after like not enough people get
cards. Yeah, the first weekend it's always
strange.
awkward, and then people are going to pre-releases as well. For example, I won't be playing challenge on Saturday probably because I want to play.
Me too, because
pre-release. So we will be posting our February update for Modern on. Today is 8th. So yeah, basically the last week of February. And then we will probably wait till mid-March with the March update so we don't get like 2 updates back to back.
Or just skip the March, to be honest.
Or skip March. We'll see.
So close to
we might do like February/March one. We'll see. We'll see.
And if you have like any ideas about what you want to listen to, what you want us to talk about, just
let us know.
Yeah.
We want you to be heard and your idea to be implemented by us. So yeah, without any further ado, thanks for watching this fairly lengthy review of Kamigawa. We'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye. And see you.
Bye.